Here's the praxis. Here's the point in which we begin the practice work. We begin grounding in what we've learned theoretically, the massive amounts of information and research and the distance that we've traveled as humans in the worlds of research and academia. We take that knowledge and we practice it, we apply it to our worlds. We no longer have this bridge between theory and application, but we are the learnings. We become the wisdom, and that requires practice, that requires community, that requires returning to a body of work again and again, returning to the different ways that we remember learning can feel and be like, that it doesn't have to be the colonized system. It doesn't have to be that standards and testing and grades and all these other things that don't matter. They simply don't matter in the real world, in nature, in reality. They're made up, and that's part of the white supremacy delusion, the tenet of the praise of the written word, things that are written down and quantified in certain ways that measure a person's intelligence and worth, when that is something that is not quantifiable. That is quite a spiritual task. So if you are an educator and you have always felt different, this is for the educators, the parents, the healers, the people who already recognize that the system is broken, who already see and might have experienced themselves and have awareness of their experience of harm within the system. This is for those of us who are ready to begin practicing a new way of relating to learning in ourselves, a way that is grounded in indigenous wisdom, that is grounded in the ancient knowings and research and biology and neuroscience and academia and all the things that have been put out in the field of educational science as best practice, but are not lived in the systems because the structures themselves are not compatible with best practice. The structures of education in colonized countries do not mesh well, are not compatible with what is best practice. Because what a colonized education system asks of us is assimilation, is a stripping of soul and culture. And so when we begin from that place, everything that comes after that is already inherently misaligned. And that is why the Lighthouse Learning Model and Liberated Learning aims to reinstate the core of where we're coming from when it comes to education, no longer allowing the colonized view and the harmful ways that education has perpetuated oppression and created things like the school to prison pipeline, no longer allowing that as just okay. It's not. And so we do something about it. And that action is remembering and practicing these ancient ways of being that when we start to lean into, feel familiar because they are of our blood. Ancient practices that are now confirmed with neuroscience and biology. So this cohort, the Foundations cohort, is a space for those of you who are ready to practice a new way of being in relationship with learning. What we are co-creating together is a community of liberated learners gathering around healing education from the root and utilizing education as repair for yourself and your beingness, and then for others in your relational web and all beings in our relational web. So the practice begins with us and doing that work internally and then comes out into the community. The cohort has been born from the need for transformative, liberatory education that is not trying to fix a system that is designed to colonize and assimilate and indoctrinate, but that aims to reinstate a remembering much deeper and more ancient that lives at our core. And that is the wisdom of indigenous peoples. That is the indigenous blood that I carry from my mother's line of the Raramuri people of Chihuahua, Mexico, and the Copper Canyon. The world's best long distance runners, endurance that lives in my blood. And I invite you to tap into your lineage as well. This work is born from the experiences with students, teachers, parents, community members, organizations around liberation and healing when it comes to education. This work is born from the conversations and the interactions, from the failures and successes, from the trial and the error and the lesson planning and the unit planning and the conflict and the restoration, the experiences that I've had along the way that have guided a remembering for myself back to my own indigenous lineage. And I'm currently in a process of reconnecting to my Raramuri roots and the spiritual traditions and teachings that they carry and hold reflect so much of the wisdom that I've inherently had throughout my education career. My first year in the classroom, I already intuitively knew that relationships and building those with students was priority and was necessary for a healthy learning environment. I could sense in the relational web of the room when energy felt off or certain conflicts were beginning to brew. These little subtle cues and learnings that I later found out in my master's program had language and academia and real science and backing to all come back now as I reconnect with my lineage through the spiritual teachings of the Raramuri, talking about interconnectedness and reciprocity, and the health of the community is the health of us all. These teachings that are liberation, that are sovereignty, and that our education system that has been colonized from its beginnings does not embody, does not practice. It restricts us from actually experiencing the fullness of what learning and an inspired learning environment can feel like, can be like. It restricts us from experiencing what a liberating learning environment can feel like. It makes us form and assimilate to fit a standard, a norm that nobody chose, that does not support anyone. It doesn't support anyone to support a white heteronormative blah, 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 right? Insert the dominant identity markers here. Right. So, liberated learning, we are transforming that. We are acknowledging the system, first of all, which is something that is a challenge for a lot of people to do. And let's make it happen. Let's look at it. Look at it. We are no longer in an age where you can play ignorant. There is so much information out there, and we have to be in integrity with how we interact with our systems of today. And with that integrity, it requires actual self-study and practice with yourself, being in alignment, and then seeing how when we tend our light, how life changes, how we are in that seat of power and sovereignty and co-creativeness with our environment. That empowerment is what will fuel the co-creation that is needed for healing systems to be reestablished in our societies, for systems and educational practices and ways that we tend to community that regenerate life, that do not stagnate us, that do not hold us stuck in patternings that perpetuate suffering, but that heal and that rewrite what it is that we want to experience in community. It begins with looking at the shadow. It begins with looking at the dark truth that sits at the root of the system. Look at it, sit with it, let it change you, let it move you. And from that space of honest reflection and letting the knowledge sit so deeply within you, then choose how you want to move forward. If you are ready for a space to practice with community, to be held in your own discovery and unraveling your relationship with education and how you would like to re-indigenize your practice, this is a space for you. If you're someone who is seeking community around education and learning, creating spaces for children and adults that feel life-giving and not soul-sucking, come through the Foundations cohort. The timing is intentional. We will lean into that medicine as the cohort is designed in alignment with Indigenous education principles, which means we honor and move with the rhythms of the seasons. So if this sounds like something you would be interested in, enrollment is now open. I would love to be in circle with you. Maybe this also brings to mind someone you know who is in education, who cares about liberation, who cares about re-indigenization and the sovereignty of Indigenous ways of being and practices. This is a great opportunity to also forward and share with those people who are looking for this kind of transformative learning space.